right, good morning, everyone. I have about 9 a.m., so let's go ahead and get started. I am excited to have everyone here this morning. Once again, I'm Liz John with CEER, the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource. We work in Texas and Oklahoma, and the City Efficiency Leadership Council is one of our program areas. As many of you know, it's a peer-to-peer collaboration, information sharing, and resource program for local governments and cities. We mainly work with municipalities, but it's open to any public entity. We also work with independent school districts. We offer webinars such as these, as well as regional roundtable meetings, technical resources, and reports. If you're interested in getting more involved, please feel free to reach out to myself, and I can throw my email address into the chat. Let's see, I wanted to make a few quick announcements. This is what we just went over, and just some upcoming news. Happy Earth Day to everyone. We do have a new city's local government manager that will be replacing Cassidy, and she will be joining us in 2 short weeks, and she is coming from the Travis County Sustainability Center. So we are very excited to have her. She's already in this arena. And just a reminder that these webinars are ICC approved, and you can receive CEUs with these, and I will follow up with some information for that after. Our speakers today are joining us from CEER, and before we get started and I have them introduce themselves, if you don't mind just throwing into the chat who you are, who you're joining with, and then kind of what you expect or would like to get out of today's webinar, that would be great. So we kind of know our audience, and that will help our speakers. And then also, as a reminder, if you have any questions throughout, also feel free to throw those in the chat, and then at the end, we'll open up to Q&A. Shy, see, we have some people on. Anyone want to start? All right, well, Iris, if you want to go ahead and kick it off, I will keep an eye on the chat for you and let you introduce yourself and Carmen. I can stop sharing for you. There we go.
That sounds great. Thank you, Liz. Good morning. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here and to tell you a little bit about the work that we're leading in the Houston region, and really hope to just have a conversation with you and to have a two-way exchange, because we are still very much in a learning and beginning phase of this work, which you'll hear about. My name is Iris or Iris Gonzalez, and I serve as the Coalition Director for CEER, the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience. And I also have on the line Carmen with me this morning. Do you want to say hi, Carmen?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Carmen Gonzalez. I work with CEER as a climate justice organizer, and I'm leading the campaign for climate justice in the Northeast region.
Yeah, so we're really excited to be here with you. I'm going to kick it off with a couple of slides just to introduce our organization and some of the work that we are spearheading. And then Carmen will tell you a little bit more about the campaign and the goals that relate with a lot of the work that you all are leading. And then we'll kind of, hopefully get into some dialogue and discussion. Hopefully what we share will spark some things, and perhaps you have something to offer that could help us, and we have something to offer that can help you. So to introduce CEER, CEER is a coalition, a collaboration that raises awareness of the connection between pollution, place, and the public's health. We are a coalition of these 27 nonprofit member organizations who came together shortly after Hurricane Harvey, so just over almost now 4 years ago, in the wake of the storm. And you'll see that the 27 members that created the coalition come from kind of two main buckets or main sectors of work. About half of our membership are mainstream, traditional, mostly white-led, environmental, green groups who are working on a variety of issues, some of whom have a statewide presence or a national presence, some of whom are smaller conservation groups. And then the other half of our membership comes really from, enters the conversation from a lens of civil rights, right? The fact that clean air, clean land, clean water is a human right, is a civil right. And we can't talk about environmental work without talking about social justice work. And so I highlight that because these groups don't typically sit at the same table or stand up together or stand up for one another in very intentional and explicit ways. And so we at CEER are very comfortable with the uncomfortable. We have a lot of growing and learning that we do together. And we believe that, you know, to hold space for that tension and to work through that discomfort gets better results. And the idea of this collaborative is to share power across these groups to advance more equitable, more resilient, and more socially just environmental justice policy. And let me say one more thing. Dr. Robert Bullard, who's one of the founders of CEER, talks a lot about how it took a biblical event like Hurricane Harvey to pull all these groups to the same place under a common banner. And I think that we have a similar opportunity in the wake of Winter Storm Uri. There's new appetite, there's new political will, there's new focus and awareness and heightened attention on what's happening. And so I think we see that the iron is hot and we need to take advantage. So I also always like to just introduce ourselves through the values that guide our work. And there are many, but these are a couple of the ones that come up consistently for us. And so first is that impacted residents, we believe, are experts and their lived experience is data. And that means that we work very closely with impacted community members and we do our best to listen as much as possible. And we also do our best to facilitate spaces where they can be heard and they can be listened to, which feeds into our second value that communities should speak for themselves. And you'll see this motto borrowed from the disability justice movement that drives our work, nothing about us without us. We know that having communities at the table when we're talking about designing new programs, when we're talking about designing new policy, when we're discussing how to implement that policy, yields better and more equitable results. And next is that, you know, in order to innovate, which is what we'll be talking with you all about, that's why we were created, really requires that diversity of thought. It requires the folks who are impacted by the policy and the programs to be sitting at the same table as all kinds of other experts. We also, as a coalition, value the fact that together we can go farther, right? The African proverb that to go far, go alone. I'm sorry, to go fast, go alone, to go far, go together. And so we know that it requires collaboration, it requires partnership, and that we need to move at the speed of trust of building those relationships and those partnerships. We also value people over profits. And we know that for very long, many of our systems have been created to really center on profit and on the bottom line. And that has only worked for a very small percentage of us. And so a lot of the work, especially here in Texas, especially here in Houston, the energy capital of the world, this is really about going beyond the bottom line and the profits to really think about what is it that people need and how can we center them in decision-making and, again, include them in that process. And then lastly, we know that what we're experiencing today is very much connected to what came before and what happened. And so in order for us to think about how to move forward to talk about our future, we have to examine history to understand present conditions in order to then dream what should come next, what is the future. One of the first things that our members did when they created the coalition was to create a vision, a plan for what this organization would advance. And so we have an 8-point plan You can find more details about it on our website, but these are the 8 points that are emphasized in that common vision: embracing transparency, focusing on air, land, and water and resource recovery, focusing on displaced people, and embracing resilience and equity. So from this 8-point plan, we craft sort of advocacy campaigns that we drive year to year. And these change, from over time a little bit. But these are the 3 major campaigns that CEER is currently working on. And we're going to focus just on one of them today. But the 3 that we're focused on are climate justice, and this is really targeting the city of Houston. And I'll let Carmen tell you more about what we're doing there. The Harris Thrives campaign, which is targeting Harris County, and in particular, how we address equity within how flood mitigation projects are prioritized and invested. And then we also have a regional resilience campaign where we're working in 5 regional counties that are adjacent to Harris County, and looking at how we can improve pollution control mechanisms and communications and alerts, and establish new bodies that can be held accountable within city and county government across that region. So today we're going to be focusing on the climate justice campaign and some data and ideas that have emerged from that work that connect with all the things that you all are working on. So with that, I will toss it over to Carmen to tell you more.
Thank you, Iris. I would like to give a little bit of a background of what our climate justice campaign is and the target areas. So climate justice campaign, we work in the intersection of climate change and the impacts of health. We recognize the climate change is the next, is a multiplier of all the issues that the communities are facing. This is not really an easy subject. When I start talking to the community about climate change, it was very difficult. We were just in the middle of the pandemic, and to bring another conversation with people who are surviving is not easy. So I remember my first interview with a resident that unfortunately she just passed the COVID-19. She told me, lady, I don't know anything about climate change, but let me tell you, we are dying of cancer in my community. So it was very difficult to make them see that all the issues that the community was facing, they were connected, and how climate change will be a multiplier and they will be impacted again, one more time, the most with this new threat. So with that being said, we move forward into hiring community members, because the community have their trust. And it was my way to really start moving forward this conversation. The target area is in the Northeast. We target 5 communities: Kashmir Garden, Trinity Gardens, Fifth Ward, Denver Harbor, and Lakewood. And the way that we had structured this campaign, we built sort of a coalition within a coalition. We call the Northeast Collaborative Platform. Is a compound of CEER members, impacted residents, and groups that they were already working in the ground. So when I start going into this area, it was really lifting up the work that they had already been doing for many years. Grassroots members that they start fighting about flood infrastructure. Residents that they continue fighting about harbor recovery, that they still live in houses with mold. So I start connecting all these bases and bringing new people to the conversation, and we form the Northeast Collaborative Platform. Our role is convener and connector. We create a space on the monthly meetings to talk, to give the residents an opportunity to voice their concerns and participate, and also to help them vision how can we move forward? How can we stop talking about problems, but looking at solutions, and how can we partner in this, doing this together? So the Climate Ambassador, the program that we launched, we recruited 14 ambassadors that we educate them about why they need to care about climate change. What are the components of climate change? How are we going to communicate this message to the community? In what language should we use, right? Because it was very difficult to try to convey pollution in tons of pollution. Community members, they don't really understand that. So we needed to find a way to make that into visuals and make them understand, right, that whatever they see, because the community was more concerned about illegal dumping, but they were not that concerned about air quality. And so how can we bridge the gap, right? How can we provide that knowledge in a way that they really understand and really get involved, because is what's really was killing them, right? So the ambassadors start doing surveys and tapping into the neighbors, their family members, their connections in the community. I wouldn't have been able to achieve what we achieved because it was in the middle of the pandemic. So the ambassadors, we collected 572 responses. Iris, can you move to the next one? And the questions that we asked, it was about exposure to diesel, exposure to toxic chemicals, poor indoor air quality. For every single of this, we need to give an explanation, right? Because people were not really, there were things that they were not really thinking about, right? They were surviving. They were trying to move forward in a pandemic. They were trying to put food on the table. So this conversation was difficult. And out of all these, what we did is provide visuals and have them say, see, when we talk about toxic sites, this is what we mean. And do you know which in your area we have this? And they start responding. They start answering these surveys that it took us about 20 minutes. I just also want to highlight that the technology gap is huge. So we have to do this in person with paper surveys. And the ambassadors were really incredible, reaching out to all communities. Iris, can you move to the next one? Out of all the questions that we asked them, they were concerned with everything. Once we start explaining, they were concerned with everything. But then we asked them to pick the three problems that they were more concerned, and these were the three things that they picked: flooding, that they still, with every storm, they continue flooding in that area; illegal dumping; and pests and rats. So these two things, illegal dumping and pests, are the ones that the community see on an everyday basis. So obviously they're the ones that they want to get rid of, right? They're more important for them. Next slide, Eileen. When you ask them if they think that these problems have been solved, 91% think that these problems are not solved, that they continue living with these issues. Next. And then we went into consequences of climate change. And again, we have to explain, okay, these are the problems of climate change. Now, some of the consequences is we're gonna be experiencing more heat waves. So you're gonna be using more your air conditioner. So we have, again, to explain each of this. And as a consequences of climate change, next. Yes, they picked those three. They're more concerned with three things that we asked: cost of utilities, health issues, and extreme weather. So like you see, cost of utilities, 346 people picked that as the major concern. Health issues, 371, and extreme weather, 346. Next. Then we went into solutions. So first we were like, okay, these are the problems, these are the consequences of climate change. So we propose solutions, and we give them a range about 10 possible solutions, and they pick three. They want to have in better homes. They want to have in homes that they don't flood. They want to have in homes that they feel safe. And they also 359, they also choose making polluters pay for the damage that they're causing in their neighborhood, right? When we start explaining and say, what do you think about this situation? And we make an analogy about the tobacco industry. There's like, okay, the tobacco industry lied that they were not causing cancer, and later on they were, finding out that it really was linked to lung cancer. So there were some kind of restitution there. So we start explaining every single question. So that's why this survey, it took us about 25 minutes to do. They were really on board for making polluters pay. And then something else that they really, really would like to see in their neighborhood is reinforcing rules. TCEQ, they don't reinforce the rules, and they have way too much industry in their area. So they want to see no more industry in the area. They want to see that the industry comply with regulations. And this is one of the top trees. We as CEER, Iris, can you move to the next one? Thought that this would be the one that we can push forward out of the 3 that the community selected, because these tackle 2 issues that they're very concerned. One of those is having a safe house where they can weather the storm in a place that they feel safe. And another one, the energy efficiency, because when we start asking how much do you pay on bills, the energy burden is really a lot for community members in those areas. So with that, I just want to add a couple more things about a climate justice campaign. Since we're working in the intersection of climate change and health, we brought 2 health partners. And those health partners are Legacy Community Health Center and Dr. Perkinson from the University of Texas School of Public Health. They're gonna help us to amplify the message that if the CDC called the climate change as a health crisis, why this conversation is not loud in Houston, where we have the biggest medical center, right? So they're gonna help us with that, bringing light and uplifting this conversation. They're also gonna provide education on climate change and how they impact their health. And they're gonna help us with metrics to link our policy agenda to positive health outcomes. The policy agenda that we choose and the community chooses is we are focusing on partnering with the city on the climate action plan, on the goals B1 and B2 on building optimization. So that's something that we are making clear to the community. This year is not going to be there fixing houses, but this is where we see this program can grow, and how can we partner with city and other entities to make this possible for the community. And with that, I pass it back to Iris.
Thank you so much, Carmen. So I just wanted to also connect, as Carmen just shared, we're very focused with this campaign on working closely with the City of Houston and working in the implementation of the Climate Action Plan that the City of Houston just released a year ago today on Earth Day. But we know that what's happening at a state and at a federal level is also important and influences what a city can and cannot do. And especially with the administration setting a very lofty agenda to address climate change and to also look at the intersection of equity and racial justice as a part of the climate change and climate justice conversation. We know we have to be paying attention to all those layers, and that in order for the solutions to work at a local level, there needs to be a scaffolding, a ladder, right, of that same narrative that is supporting itself up and down that ladder. And so just this past Tuesday, we traveled to Austin and took a climate ambassador. Right here in the picture, you see Miss Loretta Fields, who's one of our climate ambassadors, and testified on House Bill 4556, which would demand that that industry utilities set goals for energy efficiencies. And we know that having, as the survey results showed, having industry and having partners from industry is important, and having them pay their fair share of working towards these solutions is also what the community wants to see. And so so this is just an example of ways that, as a result of the organizing efforts, the education efforts, and working in collaboration with our coalition partners, as the Sierra Club, the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club being a really important partner on this particular piece of legislation, is how we see that we can achieve change. And so Ms. Loretta and I went to Austin. She shared her story. She is a Harvey survivor, and she is still not back in her home almost 4 years after that storm. And so I think that, what we are wanting to see is making sure that the energy efficiency conversation, which again is getting a lot of attention right now because there's so much focus on demand and supply, supply and demand of our electric grid in the wake of the winter storm. But we can't talk about that in a vacuum without understanding what's happening on the ground for folks. You know, how can we put energy efficiency investments into homes that have been hit over and over again and experienced multiple back-to-back climate shocks. And in Houston, it's the flooding, but across the state, there are a variety of climate shocks. And so, you know, we have a couple of questions and maybe ideas to put out there. As you heard, we're still very early in this conversation, and we know there's a whole lot we don't know yet. And we are still educating ourselves and educating community and bringing along our coalition partners. But I think, you know, some of the things that we really need to get our hands on and are very curious if you have anything to offer up is really more information and data, understanding the systems and the conditions right now, but making sure that data is really accessible. I think something we can be helpful with is translating that to community and making sure that it is in plain language. It is translated to multiple languages, and that it can really reach the people who are most impacted. And then I think another question, you know, that we have been asking ourselves and our you know, colleagues at the city, our friends at the city and others, is how can we stretch beyond what has been done in the past? How can we think about a different way of framing and of designing energy efficiency programs and weatherization programs to take a more holistic approach and thinking about the entire pipeline. If a home is not ready to receive a solar panel because the whole roof needs to be replaced, or if a home is still recovering from the last 3 storms, and so putting in a new water heater, new windows, insulation, you know, you need to repair, you need to make major investments first. And so how can we consider the entire pipeline of retrofits and have these programs fit within that bigger picture? And then the last thing here, just understanding that, you know, again, climate shocks are major disruptors for the community and that they multiply the conditions on the ground. In her testimony, Ms. Fields talked about how, you know, she has in the past had her lights cut off, and that right now she's living in between her home, which is not livable, and her daughter's home. And so, you know, these issues, these questions are for those folks a matter of life and death, a matter of survival. And you know, if she was not someone who had paid off her mortgage, this could have meant an eviction. This could have meant being homeless. This could have meant, you know, literally not having a stable home to be in. And so we need to take all of that into consideration as we're thinking about this, and as we're thinking about what more can be done. How can we stretch beyond what we've always done in the past? So with that, we can open it for questions, or I'll hand it back to Liz, but we'd love to stay in touch with you all beyond today. If there's something in particular that you heard about that you want to hear more about, we'd love to connect with you and are really excited to have a dialogue with you right now.
I think that was wonderful. Thank you both. Please feel free to put anything into the chat, comments or questions. And, you know, it is important just to note that the majority of folks that, you know, low income folks have the most energy burdens. I mean, they're spending 16 to 20% on their energy bills and then deciding whether they have to forego their medicine or, you know, food or whatever it is. And energy efficiency is such a low hanging fruit in most ways, where it doesn't take many costs to, you know, upgrade to energy efficiency measures and lower, whether it's, you know, LED lights, of course, you know, insulation and things like that get a little bit more expensive, but it's important. And then going back to Hurricane Harvey and the winter storm, your house, you know, is more resilient. And I think, you know, I've been hearing a lot about passive survivability. So it's definitely an important issue to raise. And, we also hope that something comes of this and that energy efficiency measures are put in place, because as we start plugging in more EVs and electrifying homes, then you start putting more on the grid, and then, it's kind of a cycle and it happens all over again. So, Carmen, I see that you raised your hand. Did you mean to?
Yeah, I just I want to touch into something that I just talked to the community on our monthly meeting last Tuesday. How can we make these programs affordable, right? How can we make them really accessible to the community? We were comparing some programs that they have in Seattle, where the minimum income for a family of one or a family of four to qualify for these incentive programs of weatherization is $84,000. Here in Texas, for a family of one, you have to make less than 19,000 to qualify for that. So how can we really bridge that gap, right? How can we raise the bar? So you have to live in poverty to be able to qualify for these type of programs. I mean, they shouldn't be that way, right?
Yeah,
So we need to change those things to really target the people who need it the most to get those access to those programs.
I think a lot of it starts just with informing and education, which you guys are doing a great job of. I would say most just individual households probably don't even know that this exists or that it's an option. And then, same with legislators. We need to educate everyone that, energy efficiency and really just clean, affordable energy to everyone is a priority. Any questions or other comments or additions that either of you would want to add? I think this is great. I very much enjoyed it, and kind of crossed paths with member organizations. So I look forward to definitely working more with you guys in the future. I see something from in the chat. Agreed. So it says, interesting that illegal dumping and pests and rodents are not as climate generated as I would think. Yes. All right. Well, if there's nothing else to add, thank you both for taking some time out of your morning, and everyone else who attended. I appreciate it. I will follow up with just some resources and their contact information if you have anything else to add. Otherwise, everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thanks
Bye,
for
guys.
having us.